The Los Angeles Lakers captured their 17th championship in franchise history, tying the Boston Celtics for the most championships ever assembled by an organization throughout the history of the league. But we all know when it comes to sports, especially basketball, it's easier to get to the championship and win it than it is to stay on top. And the Lakers have made hella moves this offseason to make sure that they can remain atop of the NBA. And before I start this video, I would like to preference my comments by saying I am in no means a Lakers fan or a Bron-sexual. Yes, I will admit LeBron is one of my favorite players, but I watched him growing up. He's a part of my childhood, so no shit he would be in that conversation. But aside from that, I have no ties to the Los Angeles Lakers organization or any of its players. But getting back to the subject of this video, I believe that the moves the Lakers have made this offseason have set them up to not only win the next championship in 2021, but also potentially in 2022, which would lead them to not only three-peating, but establishing an NBA dynasty. But before we get into my reasoning for that, make sure you go and check out the latest episode of the Overtime podcast. The clips are on the second channel, as well as the full episodes being on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and many other podcast sites. The links are down below in the description box. But without further ado, let's get back to the topic at hand, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers started things off with a bang in the offseason as they traded their first round pick along with Danny Green in exchange for one of the best bench players in the league in Dennis Schroeder. Schroeder last year was my pick for the sixth man of the year, and though he didn't win it, he was still a contender for the award, putting up averages of 19 points and 4 assists along with 4 rebounds, with career high shooting splits of 47% from the field, nearly shooting 39% from 3 on a career high 5 attempts a game, and also shot 84% from the free throw line. This was arguably Schroeder's best season as a pro. I know he had some other solid years in Atlanta, but considering the expectations and how much it impacted that Oklahoma City Thunder's team to the point that they were running 3-guard lineups with Chris Paul, Shea, and Dennis Schroeder, I would say this was his best season. Even defensively, though he was far from an elite defender, he definitely improved and showed strides. And though a lot of that may be due to Chris Paul's effect on defense, as he is a great communicator on that side of the ball, but you still love to see improvement nonetheless, and Schroeder definitely showed that in the 2020 NBA season. The reason this pickup was a great pickup for the Los Angeles Lakers, though, is because they lost Rajon Rondo to free agency as he selected to go to the Atlanta Hawks. They tried to get him back, they gave him an offer, and considering that Rondo is already a 2-time NBA champion and probably is set for the Hall of Fame at this point, I think him chasing the bag was more than justifiable, and I think the Lakers knew there was a chance of that happening, so them trading for Dennis Schroeder was not only justifiable but was an A+ move, especially considering that they didn't have to give up too much. And sure, they did lose Danny Green, and Dennis Schroeder, like I said, he did improve on defense, but he is still by far in no means a great defensive player. So what do they do to replace Danny Green's productivity on the defensive end? They go out and they sign Wesley Matthews. And in the case of Wesley Matthews, not only is he a great 3-and-D player, but he is far more consistent, or at least he was more consistent in the playoffs last year than Danny Green was. Because with shooting splits of 42% from the field and 40% from behind the arc on 4 attempts a game, I think it's safe to say that Wesley Matthews can more than fill that void that Danny Green left them this offseason. But the moves don't just stop there when you look at this Los Angeles Lakers team. For starters, Dwight Howard initially committed to the Lakers, as he even pulled a tweet and delete as he said he was going to stay with the Los Angeles Lakers, but eventually changed his mind and signed with the Philadelphia 76ers. And sure, you could say they still had JaVale McGee, but for those who do not understand, there's a reason that JaVale did not play that much, not only in the regular season, but even in the playoffs, because JaVale is a walking foul. That's essentially been the knock on him throughout his entire career, his IQ, not only offensively, but also on the defensive end. So they go out there and they sign Montrezl Harrell. And Montrezl Harrell didn't even get paid that much. He got the mid-level exception. And I know many people are going to speculate and say he did it to stick it to the Clippers, and I definitely think there's an argument to be made as far as if that's true or not, especially when you look at his tweet that he sent out earlier in the day before he did sign with the Lakers. But regardless, he is officially a Los Angeles Laker. And sure, defensively he can be a liability against certain teams, but other than the Denver Nuggets and potentially the Houston Rockets, I don't really see how that liability is going to factor into the Lakers' playoff opportunities, especially considering the other frontcourt player that they got, which is Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol, even though he's in his old age, he's not going to be asked to do a whole lot. What I speculate his role is going to be similar to that of Brook Lopez. Protect the rim, do drop back coverage, and also space the floor and knock down your three-point shots. That's all Gasol has to do. He can get occasional boards here or there, but his role isn't going to be that much, and he's probably not even going to get hefty minutes, as in some situations, especially when they play a team like the Houston Rockets who like to do a 5-out system, AD is going to have to play the 5 anyways. So in that case, Marc Gasol is a perfect fit. Anthony Davis doesn't want to play the 5 at least full time, and Marc Gasol can be their starting 5 until they have to play teams that force them to use Anthony Davis at the center position. So as far as the acquisitions they made this offseason, not only did they fill the void of certain players that left this organization such as Rajon Rondo and Dwight Howard, as well as them trading JaVale McGee for space to sign Marc Gasol, but they were able to fill that void with players that can even be more productive than the players that they lost. So you could actually make the valid argument, and I would agree with this argument, that they are better than they were the previous season, in which they still won the NBA title. But then you also throw in the fact that they re-signed KCP to a 3-year deal. I think that just puts the icing on the cake for this Los Angeles Lakers team. Sure, you could say they could have got him at a cheaper price, but Rich Paul be working wonders, because from what I've heard, KCP did sign with Clutch Sports. So hey, shout out to Rich Paul, he is getting his players the bag. And sure, Anthony Davis hasn't re-signed yet, but according to what I've read and seen, he's just trying to wait to see what the roster is going to look like before he puts his name on the dotted line, which is completely understandable. Because if you think that Anthony Davis is going to leave the Los Angeles Lakers, especially coming off of an NBA championship, you're just out of your mind and being completely irrational. So that leads me to my conclusion. Why do I believe the Lakers will be a dynasty? It's because, for one, the Western Conference does not have a team that can deal with the duo of LeBron and Anthony Davis. And last year, their role players were fairly inconsistent. Guys like Alex Caruso, Kyle Kuzma, and Rajon Rondo, sure, they stepped up in key moments, especially Rondo, but neither of those guys are consistent third options for a team on a night-to-night basis. They took turns showing up in critical moments in games that they needed to do so, especially Rajon Rondo, who you could argue was their third best player. But now that you still have retained KCP, you still have Kyle Kuzma, who they could use as another trade piece in the future, and you've added Dennis Schroeder, who was arguably the best bench player in the league, along with the guy who actually won the Sixth Man of the Year in Montrezl Harrell, and you have Marc Gasol, who's a better three-point shooter than Dwight Howard, which even gives them more spacing on the court. I just don't see how any team in the Western Conference can oppose this Los Angeles Lakers team. They have 2 top 5 players on their roster, and they have a supporting cast that fit their duo like a glove. And I know I'm probably going to hear the arguments, you can't predict the dynasty, you can't predict the 3-peat or 3 championships in 5 years. Look at the Warriors, they didn't 3-peat. Look at the LeBron Big 3 with D-Wade and Chris Bosh, they didn't 3-peat. So many things could happen, such as injuries and players just aging, with LeBron James being at 35 years of age. And I understand all of those arguments, but with the way that team is set up right now, barring any injuries and them being in a market that attracts free agents like crazy, I just don't see their dominance stopping anytime soon. And LeBron James, I gotta be real, if he can pull off this 3-peat with Anthony Davis in the city of Los Angeles, for the most storied franchise arguably in all of professional sports, at least in America, man, The GOAT convo is going to become very interesting. But hey, that's a topic for another discussion. Y'all let me know your opinions about the Lakers in the comment section down below. Make sure you check out my articles. The links are in the description box. I made an article about Obi Toppin and if he's going to be a star or a bust. It's pretty interesting. Make sure you check that out and leave a rating. This is your boy Young Mustard signing out. Y'all stay safe and please wear a mask. I'm out. Peace.